Hi, Mr. Walden here. I'm going to be discussing the elements of plot today, and I'm going to do that through our Empower platform and go through what the students would do if they were learning about plot through Empower. And this is a learning target for level 4. And after I talk a little bit about plot, I'm going to relate that to what we're doing now, and that is reading chapter books and how you can use the elements of plot and the vocabulary of plot to talk about chapter books. All right, so the first things a student would do to learn about plot in Empower would be just go to the goals and read the goal. And the goal for this is to learn about the plot of a fictional story. We learn about the characters, settings, and events of a story. And that's just a condensed, summarized version of the elements of a plot. And it gets a little more specific too if you look at the learning targets. And then in number 2, the action, there are 7 steps here that the students have to complete. The first one being they watch a couple of videos to review what we learned about in our whole group session about plot. And what we're going to do is we're going to actually watch one right now to learn a little bit more about it or review it.
The 5 elements of plot structure.
Did you know all of your favorite movies, and even your least favorite ones, have plot structure, which includes 5 simple elements? That plot structure probably looked a lot like this.
The 5 elements in that plot structure are exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. Pretty easy to remember, right? Don't worry, we'll explain it all to you.
We're going to start with the exposition. Exposition is typically at the beginning of a story and tells the audience who the key characters are and where the story is set. In the classic animated movie Finding Nemo, the exposition introduces Marlin and Nemo, 2 clownfish who live in a sea anemone in the ocean.
Next, we'll move to rising action. The rising action marks the beginning of conflict and introduces some tension. In Finding Nemo, the rising action begins with Marlin and Nemo's fight, leading to Nemo's capture. Marlin goes on to meet Dory, where they have a run-in with some sharks.
Next is the climax. The climax is the turning point of a story where nothing after this point can be the same. When Nemo finally escapes into the ocean and finds his dad, he is immediately caught by a fishing net. Marlin choosing to trust Nemo at the risk of losing him again is the turning point for his character.
The falling action is the de-escalation of a story, when the conflicts are all being dealt with. In Finding Nemo, the falling action is Marlin and Nemo's reuniting.
Last is the resolution. All the loose ends are tied up, and it answers the question, where are the characters now? In Finding Nemo, Marlin is excited to send Nemo to school, and Nemo has a new friend named Squirt.
To sum it all up, the 5 elements of plot are exposition, rising action, climax, falling action, and resolution. Remember, characters and settings are introduced in the exposition, and the conflict is the force that drives the story up the rising action to the climax. These elements are the basis for every story and movie ever made.
So after the students would watch the video and learn a little bit more about the 5 elements of plot, then they go on and then it's their turn to practice and their turn to try to identify those elements. And to do this, for this assignment, they would use the Sneetches by Dr. Seuss. Obviously, this is not a chapter book, but it's a great starting point or jumping off point to learn these elements. So they listen to it and watch it, and then they go, they fill in what are the characters and the settings of the story, which is the exposition. They talk about the main problem of the story or the conflict, and then that part is embedded in the rising action. And then they talk about the climax, which is the high point of the story, where there's the most tension or it's the most exciting, and it's usually near the end of the story. And then, of course, the falling action and resolution, the events that happen after the climax. And then the resolution itself could sometimes have a lesson in it or a moral. And that is a good time for the students to share their opinion. And and after filling that out, this is what it looks like in a student's locker. They fill out all those questionnaires, and then we talk about it after. So, and to relate to chapter books, we are reading chapter books right now, and we are going to be using that vocabulary to discuss the characters and the settings and the main idea and the problem and the conflict, the climax and the following resolution. All that can be talked about when reading a chapter book, and there are a lot of really good chapter books out there. You can just do a simple search into Google, fantastic chapter books for elementary students. And this is a really good time for students to build up their chapter book collection. And this is the time that they need to start finding a genre they like, something they enjoy reading. And if they find something they don't like to read, then they can cross it off the list. They don't like that type, and they need to find something they do like. So as a review, we went over plot structure, and I talked a little bit there about chapter books and how this is a really important time for students in level 4 and level 5 to find chapter books, read them, and really start to get into reading with stamina, which is reading long periods of time and getting into a book and being able to discuss that with family members and friends, that book that they like. So good luck. Thanks for listening.